on hard drug by all standards, no matter how you look at it, by amount consumed and danger of addiction and threat to young people, relationship to crime, by all standards. And the advertiser is the chief pusher.
Come on, guys. It's Miller time.
It's 5 minutes on the upswing of 5.
If you got the time, Miller's got the thing.
I'm moving out of here, having myself an ice cold brew.
Harvey's Bristol Cream.
It's downright sociable.
Buds for everyone who's in the group.
Cold, crisp, old Milwaukee beer.
For the beer brewed natural.
Put a little weekend in your week. Yeah.
Today's presentation is on two major aspects of our society, on alcohol and advertising, and on their relationship to each other. Now, we're going to be looking at a lot of slides from a wide variety of sources, but I want to make a couple of important points first, so that we'll be looking at these slides from more or less the same point of view. First of all, this is not a temperance lecture, nor is it primarily a lecture about alcoholism, although that will be part of it. What it is an examination of attitudes about alcohol in this society and the effects of those attitudes on all of us, whether we drink or not, whether we have a problem with alcohol or not. Second, my aim with this work is not to reform the advertisers. It's to use the ads in order to illustrate what these attitudes are in the society and how they affect us. I do hope, however, to expose the role of the advertisers in both perpetuating and reinforcing these attitudes, and to make explicit the consequences. Basically, advertising has purposes: to recruit new users, to increase the consumption of products, and to assist potential buyers in choosing between competing brands. Now think what this means when the product is alcohol. Recruiting new users means that they want you. They want you not only to commit yourself to drinking, but to commit yourself to a lifestyle that involves heavy drinking. Increasing the consumption of products means, of course, increasing the amount of alcohol that the individual drinks, and by definition, increasing the amount of problems caused by alcohol abuse in the society. You can celebrate everything with it, and in fact, they give you a few new ideas. There's Arbor Day, Bastille Day, all kinds of things. Now, given that, perhaps the most important statistic in this presentation is this one. 27% of the drinking age population in this country consumes 93% of all the alcoholic drinks. So this is a relatively small percentage of people, less than a third, who are doing almost all of the drinking. Now, who are the 27%? Some of them are social drinkers, but most social drinkers simply don't drink that much. Many of these people are problem drinkers and alcoholics. The advertisers are well aware of this, and one of the primary purposes of the advertising is to convince the person in trouble with alcohol, the problem drinker, the alcoholic, that his or her drinking is normal and acceptable, that he or she shouldn't worry, should just relax and have another. Now, at this point, I want to make a real important point to keep in mind throughout all of this. There's a world of difference between the responsible, moderate use of alcohol and the abuse of it. I don't believe there's anything wrong with the responsible use of alcohol, but I know that the abuse of it creates enormous problems for the individual and for the society. Generally speaking, a problem drinker is anyone who has problems in his or her life because of alcohol. Problems emotionally, legally, financially, any way. 1 in 3 drinkers today admit to some indication of a drinking problem. Now, some problem drinkers are or will become alcoholics, and there's a lot of confusion in this society about alcohol, about alcoholism, many myths and stereotypes. Alcohol is a drug, a sedative drug. Alcoholism is addiction to it. But beyond that, and most important, alcoholism is a disease. It's not a moral issue. It has as little to do with willpower as does diabetes or cancer. There is no such thing as a typical alcoholic. The illness can and does strike people of all ages, all ethnic groups, all races, all income levels, etc. There are alcoholics who are alcoholic from their first drink. So we have people who are 10, 11, 12 years old in this society who are already alcoholics. And there are others who drink socially for 15, 20 years and then become alcoholic. We don't know what causes it, and there is no common denominator of character or of personality. At least 1 in 10 drinkers is alcoholic. This means over 10 million Americans. Now, the popular stereotype of the alcoholic is the Skid Row derelict, the person who's at the end of the line. As you can see, that's a tiny percentage. Less than 5% are on Skid Row. Another thing that the advertising does that I think is perhaps most insidious is it takes a lot of the signs of trouble with alcohol, a lot of the feelings that alcoholics experience, and it turns them around, it glorifies them. It makes them seem normal, and in some cases it even makes them seem desirable. The most obvious example, I think, is the obsession with alcohol, that anyone who's alcoholic or in trouble with alcohol is obsessed by it. It becomes the center of their lives. It becomes the most important ingredient in their lives. Hurry sundown. This woman's in trouble. She's desperately waiting for sundown so that her vampire Gimlet will bring her back to life. And indeed, she looks dead. This could be a coffin that she's in, and the idea is she's going to be resurrected by this drink. This is an alcoholic way of looking at alcohol. It has nothing to do with social drinking, and yet it's being presented in this ad as perfectly acceptable. And one of my major points with all of this is that the norm that alcohol advertising establishes for alcohol use in the society is abnormal and abusive. Thirst drencher. To use a drug to quench your thirst is crazy, and yet that's what's being advertised here. There's always an enormous emphasis in the ads on quantity. Bob really knows how to throw a party. He never runs out of Johnny Walker Red. So the idea being that all you need is plenty of alcohol and you're bound to have a good time. In fact, it is the party. Pour a party. Have enough of this and you don't need anything else, not even people. At the end of the day, even a bridge seems to be heading home for Red. But clearly what's being advertised here is daily drinking, is the norm of feeling that it's perfectly normal and acceptable at the end of every day to feel that you most of all want to go home and dive into your bottle of Johnny Walker Red. It separates the exceptional from the merely ordinary, and this is the way to have your life be extraordinary. Without it, you too will be like one of those Night of the Living Dead creatures in the background. One of the major feelings associated with alcoholism is a terrible feeling of loneliness and isolation and alienation. And the ads often take that symptom and they turn it around and they glorify it. They say something like, create your own special island. You're not alienated and alone. You're on your own special island. Having a 2-ounce vacation, and it certainly seems to be advertised here as a way of getting away from it all. And if you're using alcohol to escape, to get away from it all, by definition, that's abuse. And yet it's often advertised that way. It's a first-class passport right out of this world. Another sign of trouble with alcohol is a terrible feeling of self-blame, of guilt, of remorse. This may not show on the surface, but it's there inside. And the advertisers are playing upon that here. Who could blame you? Who is chained to that bottle? Who is hoarding that supply? Who could blame you for loving it this much? Alcohol is sometimes advertised as the symbol of something, and then eventually it becomes the substitute for that experience. It's the symbol of the holiday, a way to celebrate a holiday, and then eventually it's advertised as the cause for the celebration, the reason to have the celebration. Holidays were made for Michelob. Now this is a little different from saying that it's nice to have a beer or to have a drink on a holiday. This is saying that the point of the holiday is the Michelob, that it's the reason. Note also that this entire scene is inside this bottle. Right. They're promising you quite a lot with this Michelob, an entire social life. But certainly, rather than simply being advertised as a way to celebrate, this is being advertised as the cause, as it is very explicitly here. Actually, there are several good reasons for getting married. It's the symbol of sex and sexuality, and then eventually it becomes the sex itself, the black velvet ads linking the woman with the alcohol. It's the symbol of tradition, and then it becomes the tradition, on and on, right down the line, the symbol of friendship, and then it becomes the substitute for the friendship. And in fact, tragically in life, that's exactly what happens with alcoholism, that the alcoholic eventually ends up alone, relying on the alcohol as, in fact, the substitute for life. This is an abusive attitude towards alcohol. This has nothing to do with normal, responsible, moderate use of it. This is saying that without the alcohol, you won't be happy, you won't have a good time, you need it. I'm going to show you a series of ads now that you've probably never seen before. These are ads from Advertising Age, which is the major journal of the advertising industry. What these ads will show you is how the advertisers advertise to each other. Here are some figures you've never seen before. They say a lot about the 43.4 million adults who read the digest and how much of your kind of liquor they consume. Now there's another way to get more of them to specify your brand by advertising in the Reader's Digest. Now this is the Reader's Digest selling its readers to the alcohol industry. Most of us feel that if we're reading a magazine or we're watching a program, that that program is brought to us by the sponsor. The truth is actually the reverse. We are brought to the sponsor by the program. The purpose of the magazine, the purpose of the TV program, is to round us up and deliver us to the advertisers. We are the product. We are sold to the advertisers by the particular medium. I think this ad makes that explicit. The people you want, we've got all wrapped up for you. And this is the Chicago Tribune selling its readers to the advertising industry. Well, in addition to their very sophisticated research techniques that round us up, they have very sophisticated production techniques. And we as consumers are almost completely ignorant of these techniques. Not because we're stupid, but because we've never been encouraged to look at them or to take them seriously. Even a very simple, straightforward ad like this requires an enormous amount of time, energy, and money to create. They spend at least $10,000 just getting the artwork or the photograph. It's very carefully planned, every detail, the shape, the color, the positioning. They know that you don't spend more than a few seconds looking at these ads, and that's all it takes for the images to register on your unconscious. In addition, they sometimes use, in fact, they often use, what's known as subliminal techniques. Now, subliminal simply means unconscious. So what I'm talking about here is very powerful imagery, usually sexual, which is embedded in the ad and which is designed to affect you immediately on an unconscious level, but not to be perceived consciously. Now, this is not a major focus of my work, but I want to give you a couple of examples because I think it's important to know about. The next time you pour a Tanqueray, we'd like to provide one of the rocks. Well, this seems fairly straightforward and simple, but a closer look indicates that there is. This is a drawing, and it's been carefully drawn in order to contain a very powerful sexual image, the image of the phallus. Now, the two most powerful unconscious stimuli in general are sex, as in this ad, and the other is death. And a lot of people see some very powerful death imagery in this ad. Sort of tombstone-like effect in the beginning. It's a very chilling kind of scene, the icy sun, the blackness, all of it arousing some kind of anxiety, some kind of association with a cemetery or with a newly dug grave. Now, again, why would they use death imagery? Well, again, it's meant to be perceived unconsciously. It makes you anxious. It might motivate you to be struck by the ad, but also someone who's abusing alcohol is likely to be self-destructive, likely to be suicidal, likely to experience a lot of death wish stuff, and the advertisers realize this and they play upon it. What I hope to do with this presentation is to bring those unconscious messages out into the open, to make them conscious, to make them overt, because that reduces their power and it gives the power back to us. The ads imply that alcohol is a kind of magic potion that can transform us, that can make us sexy and sophisticated and successful and all kinds of things. And furthermore, they imply that without alcohol, this won't happen to us, that it's necessary, a necessary ingredient in our lives to transform us. And it does this by linking alcohol with all kinds of qualities and attributes. Now, these links are really false and arbitrary. And if anything, these are the very qualities that the abuse of alcohol diminishes and destroys. But we're so surrounded by them that we come to accept the connection as being somehow logical and natural. We come to believe that alcohol is associated with being successful, rich, a member of the jet set, being creative, being virile and masculine. All of these things, again and again, it gets linked with. We're told that alcohol makes you creative and sensitive, turns you into an artist. In a world entertained by the great and the famous, we've starred for almost 100 years. And here's J&B taking the credit for all these various art forms. Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe was an alcoholic. He died of alcoholism, he died at an early age, and he died a grotesque death. I ask you to imagine any other death by drug addiction that would be joked about in an ad, and yet it's acceptable with alcoholism. Alcohol is offered to us as a way of sharing something with the rich and the powerful. So if you drink this, you too can have a yacht and a girlfriend who's only half there. Which is a lot easier than a real relationship. There's no question about that. And alcohol, of course, is a way to have instant athletic ability, Particularly helps you out with dangerous sports like this one. God help her if she's drunk. Well, in addition to all of this, of course, one of the primary ways in which it's advertised is directly to you as the ultimate way of becoming an adult in the culture. It's the primary ritual into adulthood. Soft drinks for adults, and of course a drink in this society is by definition an alcoholic drink. Drink more pop, and they definitely want you to sort of switch from pop or Coke or whatever to alcohol, and they say not just New Year's Eve, but as often as you like, any time. They've even come out with 30-proof milkshakes all ready to go. If you're making that transition between milkshakes and alcohol, this will get you there. And they've even now come out with a 30-proof chocolate soda, just the thing for the elementary school set. And in fact, people are drinking earlier and earlier in the society today. More than 62% of all 7th graders and 80% of all 12th graders now drink. Now, they're aware of that, and that's fine with them. The idea being always hook them early, and they're yours for life. A lot of the advertising is aimed at powerless groups in the society, particularly people of color, women, and young people. And what the ads do is they promise the alcohol as a route to power. The famous one of be a czar, lots of emphasis on being a czar, being a king, having power, sharing something with the rulers, with the ruling class, with the wealthy, and with the powerful. And of course, not only does the alcohol not deliver the goods, it also makes real power impossible, not only for individuals, but collectively. And it contributes to this insidious idea that what is really social and political is only personal. And it makes it more and more difficult for these groups to sense their identity with each other and to work for the kind of change that's necessary in the society. I was wondering if I could possibly borrow a cup of Johnny Walker Black Label so that you too can put yourself in the scene. You may never live like this or live in a house like this, but you can share something with the rich and the powerful by drinking Johnny Walker. They don't want you to consciously think, if I drink, I'll be rich and successful, because that's obviously ridiculous. There is no real connection. But they do want you to have that unconscious association. And we see this again and again. The CC man is a winner, that this is a way you too can become a ruler or a winner. Now that you've earned your place in the sun, and they're making a link here between success and drinking. Now, in fact, there is a relationship between success and drinking, and it's negative. There isn't a single thing that you do that alcohol will make you do any better. This approach is also offered to women increasingly, that drinking alcohol is a way of demonstrating that we are independent and liberated. Isn't it time you knew an exciting drink to order instead of taking a man's suggestion? This is what passes for sort of a radical act of independence. And of course, it's a real co-optation, a real trivialization of what real independence or liberation is all about. Traditionally, there's a powerful stigma against the female alcoholic and against women who drink excessively, so that the woman alcoholic has been closeted, has been really kept isolated, and also is often abandoned. One of the most telling statistics that I know of about the role of women in the society is that 9 out of 10 women stay with their alcoholic husbands, but 9 out of 10 men leave their alcoholic wives. Now that, of course, says more about sexism and about the fact that women are economically dependent upon men and cannot leave even desperate situations than it does about alcohol. But it also indicates what happens to the alcoholic woman, which is that she is most often abandoned. Like most Americans, I've been touched personally by alcoholism in my own life. I've known and loved many alcoholics, some of whom are recovering and some of whom are not. And a good friend of mine, a close friend of mine, was killed by a drunk driver. He was a wonderful, talented man, and he was killed, and the person who killed him was 17 years old. So in a sense, that's 2 lives that are lost. Over 50% of all fatal automotive accidents involve alcohol. That's 25,000 deaths a year, and more than 400 people die every week in alcohol-related car crashes. This is the equivalent of a crash of a 747 airplane every single week. The reason this happens is that it's socially acceptable. We basically have no sanctions against drinking and driving. It's considered acceptable in this society, and as a result, we pay an enormous price. They even link fast cars, celebrities, and alcohol in the advertising, making it even more irresistible. Well, another approach, particularly aimed at young people, is linking alcohol with being a nonconformist, with being a real individual. Actually, the opposite is true. These are reasons given by teenagers for drinking. The primary reason for teenage drinking has to do with peer pressure and conformity. It's real important to see that if one is doing that, one is knuckling under to the real authority in this culture. One is simply following orders. To abuse alcohol is to allow yourself to be manipulated by a very powerful industry. Well, most of all, it's the potion of love. It's the ultimate aphrodisiac. It's the way to make sure that you can bewitch, bedazzle, and be loved. And of course, again and again, it's advertised as and used by men as the ultimate way to seduce women. Isn't there someone you'd like to sting? Such a wonderful attitude towards sex, too, that it's basically an injury you do to somebody else. For 15 nights I have been with Florio, never once was it the same. Primarily, it's advertised still to men as a way of being a real man, of having a particular kind of power and a particular kind of confidence, particularly sexual confidence. I'm as sure of myself on each thrust as I am when choosing my scotch. The underlying message to men is that if you drink, you too will be a terrific lover, a real stud. Now, as many of us know, there's another side to this, too. Shakespeare perhaps put it best: drink provokes the desire, but takes away the performance. And often it involves a kind of power that's not only dominant and aggressive, but quite brutal and frightening, as in this very bizarre ad. This time I won't forget, when Ed says Scotch, he means Johnny Walker Red, Johnny Walker Red, Johnny Walker Red, Johnny Walker Red. What has gone on here to terrorize this woman so that she is marching to the liquor store, making sure that this time she gets it right? Why don't we see her face? I think that many of us know that alcohol abuse is linked with domestic violence, with battering. Certainly something has gone on here to terrorize her. There's a lot of anxiety in this ad, a lot of violence being hinted at. So most of us know that violence and alcohol abuse are related, but few of us know the full extent. 55% of all the arrests in this country are linked to the abuse of alcohol, and violent behavior attributed to alcohol abuse accounts for approximately 65% of all murders, 40% of all assaults, 55% of fights or assaults in the home, and 60% of cases of child abuse. Now, all of these things are complex, and I'm not saying that alcohol is the cause of these problems, but certainly the alcohol abuse contributes to them. And when alcoholism is treated, associated violent behavior is known to decrease. Why then do we hear so little about it? Why is there so much misinformation and so little truth? There seems to be a general reluctance to discuss the issue, and people who bring it up quickly get labeled prohibitionist, killjoy, whatever. The major reason for the silence is that the media depend upon alcohol, tobacco, and drug advertising. These are the most heavily advertised products in the society, and if ads for these products were banned, over half the publications in the country would go out of business. Time magazine did a cover story on violent crime in America during the summer of '81, and it was one of their complete cover stories in which they did a lot of research and came up with all this evidence about how much crime there was and how deeply it affected everyone in the society. And they did mention that drug abuse is linked with crime, which indeed it is, alcohol being far and away the #1 drug that is linked with crime in the society. The only drug Time mentioned, however, in the article was marijuana, which may have its own set of problems, but is certainly is not a violent drug. And they didn't mention alcohol. Now, it seems highly unlikely to me that Time's researchers would not have discovered the true statistics about alcohol abuse and violent crime, but rather that they certainly were influenced by the fact that that particular issue of Time had 5 full-page, full-color ads for alcohol. Given that, it certainly becomes very difficult to get accurate information. Alcohol is the nation's #1 drug, and the advertiser is the chief pusher. Now, as I mentioned earlier, advertising alone does not create alcohol problems, and changes in the advertising won't solve these problems. But advertising does play a very important role in developing attitudes about drinking and in establishing norms which are damaging and which contribute to the overall problem. Sometimes the advertisers come out with preventive ads like this: "But Daddy, if I don't drink, they'll think I'm nowhere." But of course, that's precisely what this ad is saying. And these ads are almost always black and white, very two-dimensional. They don't begin to compare with the lavish ads on which they spend most of their money. The alcohol industry spends $900 million a year promoting the use, and I feel the abuse, of alcohol, and we pay the price. But in addition, and perhaps most important, we all pay a very high price for the mythology, for this belief in magic and in the need to escape all pain, and in the escalating trend in this society to seek drugs as instant solutions to life's complex problems and as alternatives. We lose some of our best people. We lose a lot of our best energy. It all contributes to what Robert J. Lifton calls the psychic numbing that has taken place in the society. We're faced with some amazing problems. Rather than being able to face them, we prefer to tune out. And the alcohol abuse is a big part of that tuning out. But what it does, of course, is it makes it impossible to find real solutions to the problems. So whether we drink or not, this is an attitude that affects all of us. There are very few people who don't have a friend or a relative or a coworker or a lover for whom alcohol is a problem, and very few alcoholics get help. Fewer than 1 in 10 alcoholics get the treatment they need. Alcoholism can be arrested but not cured. If not treated, it ends in permanent brain damage and early death. Most successful method of treatment so far is Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a wonderful organization which has helped hundreds of thousands of alcoholics throughout the world. And that organization is free and open to all and available through the nearest telephone directory. There's also an organization called Al-Anon, which is for people who are in relationships with alcoholics. And that, too, is free and available and local and international. What we need to promote is the idea of moderation, of responsible drinking. We need to offer treatment where indicated, but mostly we need to work on prevention, because prevention is the best weapon against the spreading disease of alcoholism. No illness is ever brought under control by treating only the casualties. And prevention means working on changing the norms, looking at our own attitudes and working to change the attitudes in the society. And our chief barrier to that is the major refusal in the society to look at the problem, to take it seriously. Another thing we can all do is help our friends with drinking problems. And the chief way to help is to not collude with the denial. Alcoholism is an illness of denial. And as a society, we generally support that denial. Certainly the advertising supports that denial. And what we need to do more than anything else is to stop doing that. We need to recognize what the symptoms are of problems with alcohol. We need to really help people who have those symptoms to get treatment and not pretend that this is normal drinking, that this is okay, that this isn't interfering with their lives. But it's everybody's problem, it's everybody's business, and working together, we could find some solutions. Thank you very much.